once we started fighting, she went, "Oh crap!" and started recording. She
I
goes,
know.
"They're fighting. I want this on tape."
I saw it.
That's how old I am. I still refer to things on tape, and they're not anymore.
We're
turns out.
shooting a videotape
Shooting
for the World Wide
Okay.
Webs.
Okay. First of all, I did not say that, and second, I didn't suddenly come from someplace remote and far down south. I was going to name like a state, but then thought one of y'all might be upset by that. So, avoiding conflict with you.
So conflict happens, but
Sure enough.
how we respond can change the dynamic. Let's talk about it.
You are watching the Beyond Sunday podcast.
So we talked in our last episode
We did.
about conflict and the division that is naturally among us.
Some of the
as
impact
we-
about it, yep.
Yep, into coming into conflict. So let's talk about some of the responses that we give and how the way we respond could shift the dynamic of the conflict. So why don't you share about the aggressive responses that we tend to lean into at times?
I feel like I got the aggressive ones on purpose. All right, but the aggressive ones are typically the things that some of us may lean into. See if this aligns with you. So for aggressive responses, we get things like openly attacking. This could, like we said in the last episode, could end up with your boss coming through and tagging you. But more than likely, we're talking raised voices, people just getting in each other's face, getting that red face, a little hostility.
Throwing some colorful language.
Could, fair enough. Could happen. A little bit of name calling, a little bit of judgment going on there.
Right.
So attacking, this is, really just openly me versus you kind of thing. One of the I think one of the worst, more aggressive responses is when we move over gossiping. So now in a way, we have to be really honest with ourselves. At that point, I'm still attacking you. I'm assaulting your person, but I'm not even doing it to your face now.
Yeah, that's like
I'm sure
waiting
somebody
till you
else.
fall asleep to start punching you. It's like so that you're defenseless. That really is
It's safer that way as the attacker, to be honest. It's get away with a lot more if you do that.
right.
But yeah, so I mean that's really is the same thing. It's you're unawares, but I'm going to go ahead and begin attacking. And as we look at kind of coming into a team environment, we can move into, besides being aggressive and gossiping, things like that, we can actually stop supporting one another. And I would argue that is a big form of aggression, because somebody needs help, they're working on it, and if somewhere in the back of your mind you go, you know what, let them figure it out themselves. You know what, that's your business. The moment you're having that inner monologue, they may not know anything about that, but you're withholding something at that point, and I'd argue that's a piece of aggression as well.
I think that starts to flirt with, that's like some of the gray area between aggression and passiveness.
Okay,
So, which is where we get passive aggressive.
fair enough.
That's where I want to be against you, but I'm going to try and do it creatively.
In all honesty, I think it's where you go, I want to be against you, but I'm a little bit too chicken to do it to your face.
Maybe,
A little bit.
but I think passive aggressive, it unfortunately takes a little bit more creativity to make it hurt if you're in conflict.
Are you applauding their aggression at this point? You go, it's aggressive, but well thought out, you.
I am not applauding it, but I am speaking from a place of reality in my own life at times.
Oh, yeah. See, and I'm going to say that when I'm passive aggressive, it isn't creative. For me, totally honest, it is cowardly. For me, 100%. Because it's like, I'm so angry, but instead of getting up in your face, which is uncomfortable back to me,
Right.
I'm just going to kind of just stew over this way and have the lack of support or anything else. We sound like horrible people, by the way, right now, as if we're always in conflict. We never argue.
We're honest.
That's true.
It's
something. We got that going for us.
yeah.
All right, but give me some examples of, as we move kind of from aggressive, kind of passive aggressive, we're towing the line, into no kidding, just straight up, we're having conflict, but now we're just being passive about it.
Yeah, I think when it comes to like passive responses or dealing with passiveness, it a lot of times there's classic like dismissive statements maybe
Okay.
that we can use. Even like, say you're responding in a passive way, and maybe you've been hurt or wronged, and you go, "It doesn't matter," or "I wasn't."
Ooh, yeah, that's not going to be
No,
good.
that it's okay. Or it wasn't like, it's uncomfortable to even hear now.
No, it's like
seriously.
there's something coming right after. The other side of that is a bad choice. Something bad's coming.
But the reality is, I don't think the other side ever gets said.
Right. I think so.
And so there is an ugly side, and I think people realize it more times than not. But since they didn't say it, it's like it doesn't exist. But
Okay.
it does.
Right. Yeah, yeah.
It definitely does. And like we talked about in the last episode, it begins stewing and it creates a very ungood situation. But I think some of the dismissive statements is in a way sometimes us trying to share feelings,
Right.
but it's not done in a way that is productive or clear.
Right. Yeah, it almost feels like there's a little bit of manipulation. I'm not going to say the things I want to say, but even an example you gave, I'm going to give a tone with it that opens a door and says, "I'm unhappy. I'm opening the door, letting you solve. I'm not going to bring up our conflict. I'm going to lob this softball out here and let you do it." And the other person goes, "Nope," and they just don't want to be a part of it either. But yeah.
Yeah.
There's something unsaid.
I know for me, like I would never condone either one of these as healthy options, period, straight up.
Fair.
They're
Yeah.
they're both poor ideas.
Right.
However, I will say that when you're dealing with pure aggression, you do know how somebody feels.
Fair. Yeah.
And, as long as we're not talking like physical aggression, it is clear, and I know what you
Right.
think. And one of the most dangerous things with passive responses is that I think I know how you feel,
Okay.
but I really don't. Or you've thrown so many like subtle daggers that I can't tell if it hurts or if I should take offense to something.
Uh-huh.
And it begins getting very muddy as to what our conflict is.
Right.
What did your response tell me about our conflict? And then it creates so much muddy water. I have no idea what to do.
Right. I think one of the one of the things that I think can happen as well is kind of a passive response is that, when we don't want to deal with conflict, because I think in a lot of cases we see nothing but bad examples. So when we see, conflict, and again, I think we're making wrong assumptions that we're assuming it's this argument sort of thing.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a part of any of that. And the only thing we see are people who are using attacking words, things like that. And so it's almost this sort of fight or flight thing. Well, I don't want to fight. So I guess that leaves me only the other option. And so I think one of the other passive things we see is that people begin to distance. I'm going to back away from this. Hey, I'm just not going to be around. And I think, in interpersonal relationships, you see that a lot where, people just aren't close anymore. They start just backing away, and it's, I was avoiding conflict, or I didn't want to deal with conflict that was already very real and very present, and we're just spacing out, from each other. But, an entire relationship begins to dissolve if you got too much of that's happening.
There's like some subtle discomfort that just slowly floats our orbits away from each other.
Right.
And we begin extracting ourselves because
Right.
it's just off when I'm around that person now.
Right. Yeah. So your friendship is like, hey, I don't see you hang around with that person anymore. Yeah. We haven't talked in a couple weeks. Or you see, I'm sure all of us have probably seen the married couple that seems like roommates. They're just two people that happen to live together. They share rent and things like that. The people I'm talking about. Hopefully it's not you. But we've seen those kinds of things on a team. I think that's, you start just operating in your silos. You do your thing. I'm doing my thing. But there's just this distance. And like you said, we're no longer in the same orbit. But I think that's a huge passive response that people can take very often.
Yeah. I'm convinced that passive responses are some of the most dangerous ones, just because it really does blur the lines. Like you said, on a team environment or a marriage or relationship, you begin, and maybe both of us in the situation have an understanding of even a vision forward.
Mm-hmm.
So even in pursuit of a good thing, where there is difference, we begin in our own little vehicles headed towards this thing, but we're not in the same boat really.
Okay.
And it begins to, I think, just slowly separate, even where we think we're moving forward because we're not actually together.
Right.
Then it begins just slowly spreading. And then you
Interesting. All
get
right.
to the point where you're so far away from each other or the goal or the mission. And then it takes so much more repair and restoration to resolve what potentially at one time was such a small conflict
Right.
that even though it would have been uncomfortable, it would have been efficiently and quickly repairable.
Right. And so, I think if you're following us that, conflict's going to happen. It's just, it's part of human nature. How we respond to it is the deal. So aggression, not good. Passivity, we think that's the other option. I think a lot of times we're ingrained that way. There's, it's again, binary. It's this or that. But there is a third option, and that's reconciliation. And I think reconciliation, that every time that we have a conflict, three options are always on the table: aggressive, passive, or this middle ground. And so when you think of that, when you hear that kind of reconciling response, we've had conflict of some degree. What do you think of when you hear that as a response?
When I think of reconciliation, the word pulls the advantages of these poor responses and brings it to a positive side. So
Okay.
in the positive to aggression, not that aggression is the positive, but if you were to pull out the strength of aggression, it's clarity.
Okay. Yeah.
And I think
give
you
that.
receive clarity from aggression typically.
Okay.
And so reconciling takes clarity. And so it owns what is good from the other bad.
Right. And I think the aggressive side brings something forward. It brings it into the light and says, here's the deal.
Yes.
Again, aggression's not in the healthy way.
Right.
But at least the good part of it is I'm bringing something into the
Yeah,
forefront.
it is very
at least.
direct. I'm going to bring
Yeah.
it to you a little
There
too
you go.
fast, probably,
A little too hot.
but I'm
yeah.
bringing it.
Right.
And then on the passive side, I think what you get is peace and a little bit more gentleness.
Okay. I agree
So, which in terms of reconciliation, I think you get clarity and humility. So clarity is going to always pull forward the reality that there is a conflict.
Yep. There's
Small or
something here.
big, it doesn't matter the size.
Right.
But it brings clarity. And then along with reconciliation, you get the clarity, but you have humility, which is the only way you can begin to reconcile.
Right.
I'm not concerned about how you respond to me. I'm concerned about me reconciling with you. And it begins to take ownership only on your side when you seek reconciliation.
Okay. See, I like that. When I was thinking about it, I was thinking about the different objectives in each. The thing I think that reconciliation brings that's different from the others is that reconciliation says my prime objective is our relationship. It's our friendship, our working relationship, our marriage, whatever it is. So our prime thing is our relationship, whereas aggression says my prime objective is being right.
Yeah.
I need to be heard. I need to be right. I need to win. I, as a person who used to actually approach conflict like this a lot, is I want to win. I want to be right and everything else. And I think passivity says I want to have peace. Even at the detriment of our relationship, it says I want to have peace. And so I think you have different focuses in each one, and that reconciling piece says, hey, I want us to be a team after this, whatever this hiccup is, no matter how big or small it is.
It's like it allows you to see the bigger picture.
Yeah.
Reconciliation sees the our relationship as the real issue, even though there's a small conflict in the middle.
Right.
We deal with the conflict, it repairs relationship.
Right.
And so it's a little bit just higher viewpoint of reality.
Yeah, and I like that because I think that that's the thing is when you look at aggressive or passive, those two, the central piece is whatever the issue is. The conflict is the center of it. Reconciliation says the relationship is at the center. The issue is actually peripheral to this. The relationship exists, it stays, it holds no matter what. The issue is something that we'll just work through together. But aggressive or passive says the thing that's in the forefront is the issue. And our relationship sits outside of that. And so you have to invert it and flop it around to actually respond differently.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I think it's a real big deal. So what do you think is kind of one of the most important things as you're thinking through these response options? What do you think is most important for each of us to keep in the forefront of our mind?
So, number one rule for me, and I have to literally constantly remind myself of this, I am only responsible for my own responses.
Okay.
I can only take responsibility for how I walk through a situation. As much as I wish that I could puppet the way that other people responded or acted, I can wish, I can dream, I could hope, but at the end of the day, I get to respond and choose how I respond.
Right.
And so I think the most important thing is to own your response, whether right or wrong, you're in control of that moment. And that is our greatest responsibility especially if we're going to go towards reconciliation rather than hopefully aggression or passivity. In seeking reconciliation, we are first going to choose to own our responsibility, and I'm going to make the first step of repair.
Okay.
And at some point, I have to choose that I might potentially surrender my own first step and may not receive it back.
Oh, okay, yeah. No, and I think that's fair because I think for a lot of folks that as you try and suggest something as a way of approaching a conflict that seems different, it feels dangerous in some cases because you say, hey, I want you to take a big, bold step. I want you to try and reconcile. And you go, but what if they don't? And it reminds me of what the Apostle Paul said. He said, as far as it is up to you, live at peace with everyone.
Yeah.
He didn't say, by the way, you're going to live at peace with everyone. He said, no, as far as it is up to you. So on your side, own your thing, and you try and reconcile, even if it doesn't work out. Make that big step yourself. So it does have that, I don't know, a little anxiousness to it. But what if they don't? So.
Yeah, and it's a risk that you take. Reconciliation, I think, always welcomes a risk, but it's one worth taking because, at the end of the day, that is all we get to do. However, in my experience, when I am after reconciliation, often it changes the temperature of whatever conflict is there. So when I come up, I can even think of moments that you and I've worked through challenges, and if I'm willing to just own that I have a part to play in this. I'm only concerned with owning my part. I have to surrender that you may not own your part. But if I'm willing to do that, oftentimes, hey, I'd like to talk to you about something. You're like, okay, I know what we're going through. Let's talk.
I'm aware. Yeah,
let's talk about it. I'm curious to see how this goes. And then, the first person starts talking, and if they own their own responsibility, you're like,
fair enough. Okay,
go beat that guy up now.
It's like I had a lot of really
cool thing right there.
I have a lot of sharp returns, a lot of things planned to say.
I had my responses.
Dang it! None of those are going to work because you took a different path. But
I you don't feel like you don't feel a burden of losing your bullets that you had built for that person. You're ready to get rid of them because when it comes down to it, I don't want to shoot people with aggression.
No,
I don't want to send verbal bullets at people. Really.
No, if you have that feeling, which I think that feeling's real, it comes from the fact that you're hurt and you're upset or embarrassed, frustrated. So there's your feelings at work, and really those aggressive bullets are simply, I'm trying to deal with my own feelings. But like you said, if you, the person that I'm planning to target, come back, you change the tone and the temperature, well, I don't feel like shooting back anymore.
Right.
Dealing with healthy people, whereas making that assumption first.
Yeah, and it doesn't always work like that.
No.
But a lot of times I have experienced the benefit of coming humbly into a situation or a conflict, and it immediately diffuses the conflict and lets the other person know they're not here to attack me.
Right.
This is a safe place. I can let my guard down. We can walk through some healing.
Right. And I think this, the different responses we're talking about, we've been talking and we'll keep talking about kind of bad and unhealthy conflict. I think there is good and healthy conflict. You and I definitely are not a, kind of a group think sort of thing. We bring different opinions. So I think there's healthy conflict that people have so that we can challenge each other and work forward. But even in healthy conflict, I think all three of these responses or options and the kind of the reconciling option is still the most important one, even in good conflict.
Totally.
Right. So, well, that's a little bit about responses to conflict. Next time, we think at least, we're going to start talking about the process of reconciling, what that actually looks like, and we'll cover that with you next time. See you then.
This has been another episode of the Beyond Sunday podcast. And don't forget, like, share, and subscribe.